In the last week, the nominations came out for the 2024 Ballon d'Or, and in that nominees list, you get 30 players. 30 different footballers on this planet. And Mo Salah isn't one of them. And this, for me, leads to a bigger question. Is Mo Salah disrespected? Let's get into it. When you have a talk with your friends, or you go on Twitter, or wherever you have a conversation about the best Premier League players of all time, or the best Premier League players in the modern era, Mo Salah is usually like the 4th or 5th player you usually hear before the rest of the pack, and I feel like that's a bit disrespected. When you talk about the best Prem players, you hear about Eden Hazard, you hear about Kevin De Bruyne, you hear about Luis Suarez, Harry Kane. Mo Salah is typically like a bit of an afterthought when it's like, oh yeah, actually, maybe you have a point. And he's never the first name that comes to your mind. Now, of course, that is a very broad statement, and that doesn't speak on behalf of everyone. But from what I gathered from all my years talking to people, that it seemed to be the majority of people. Of course, this is coming off the back of a great start to yet another campaign. His 7th one now. And, of course, on top of that, many people expecting Salah to fade away and to not be as impactful in his Liverpool team. Starting the season with 3 games, 3 goals, and 3 assists. And with the looming contract extension over his head, it's looking more and more likely that he is absolutely vital to stay at Liverpool. Comment down below your thoughts on Mo Salah, and do you believe that he is disrespected and why? I got my own reasons as of why, and we're going to get into that. So comment down below, like, subscribe, and Mazzala Designs for the best football prints, all made by myself. Link down below. Use code Salah for 15% off all items. And let's get into it. Stats. We all love stats, so let's go into them. Well, Mo Salah has now hit into the top 10 most Premier League goals in history with 160. Now, looking at the list here, he's got Fowler, Defoe, Thierry Henry only 15 goals ahead, and Frank Lampard with 17 goals ahead. So perhaps by the end of this season, if he keeps up this form, he will guarantee to be in the top 8, but he could potentially break into the 6th top goal scorer in history. And it's not only the goals, it's also the assists as well. Well, he's now into the top 15 for assists now in history, and by the end of this year, he could be very well into the top 10, going ahead of the likes of David Beckham. Now, if I was to say to you, what exactly is Mo Salah's role or his skill set? Well, it's kind of changed over time. At first, he was, of course, a dribbler, an electric dribbler that was a pure winger that chips in with goals. Kind of something similar to a Sadio Mane as well, almost like an inside forward. Because a winger is usually someone that you'd expect to create the goals, and an inside forward is more someone that would score the goals. Sadio Mane probably more suits this definition. However, Salah is a bit of both, but in that first season or two at Liverpool, I mean, no one knew how to really describe him. He broke the Premier League goal record, for God's sake. And he came from Roma, which no one had. People thought he maybe bagged 10 goals or 15 or maybe so. No one thought he would bag that many. Just to remind you, 32 goals as a winger. And also 10 assists as well in that 17-18 season. I mean, yes, the year before we got 15 goals and 13 assists in the Serie A, but like, people typically anticipate the Premier League to be another step up, to be a bit more of a harder level. So for him to double that is obscene. Mo Salah is now top of Golden Boots alongside Alan Shearer with 3 Golden Boots. Salah has scored over 20 goals and 10 assists in 6 of his last 7 seasons. He's done it 3 in a row consecutively. And by looking at this campaign, it's probably going to be a 4th. Stats-wise, goal contribution per 90, goals and assists is the same level as Thierry Henry. He's won every single trophy possible at Liverpool. Not as many trophies as what people may say, but hey, he's still won everything. And when you compete against Man City, fair enough. So many records. However, when you talk about the best Premier League players of all time, You often hear Eden Hazard get mentioned ahead of him. Christ, last week I heard someone say Alexis Sanchez. And that's not to disrespect these players, absolutely not. Eden Hazard is a great footballer, but he's nowhere near Mo Salah. Nowhere near. People really do underestimate the impact of him being in the Premier League when it comes to a Muslim audience. He is by far the biggest Muslim footballer in the world, and that brings so much more attention and eyes onto the game. I think people kind of underestimate that, honestly. Now, of course, it can be disputed that maybe he's not the greatest Muslim player. I mean, it kind of depends on who you prefer personally. I mean, people may say like Karim Benzema, back in the day probably would be Paul Pogba, but in the Premier League for the last 7 years, I mean, he's absolutely top of the list. Last season was a little bit of a concern for Mo Salah, and I feel like because of the different kind of system that they were trying out, because of Darwin Núñez and all these new players, Gakpo, Diogo Jota, he appeared to be a lot more wider and a lot more deeper than he typically was. Therefore, when he brought the ball forward, he was a lot more further away from goal to really create some opportunities. Yet he still performed. Last season was seen as a bit of a wobble season for Salah at times. However, in the Premier League, he got 18 goals and 10 assists in 32 games, and in all competitions, he's got 25 goals and 14 assists. And that was seen as a bit of an off season for him. And in terms of the campaign, Liverpool did fade away in the end, but I feel like that wasn't really a surprise. No one really expected Liverpool to even be anywhere near to a title fight, and they stuck out until nearly the end. And I just feel like for him to not even be in the top 30 of Ballon d'Or nominees is just ridiculous. I mean, in terms of his actual Ballon d'Or placements here, he's never really been high up despite all of this. The highest he has ever finished is 5th, 2 times, and then a 6th, and then a 7th, and then the last time in 2023 he's only been 11th, and now he's not even in top 30 despite only a few goals less, but I still feel like that's ridiculous. So what has changed with Salah over the last couple of years? Despite getting all these goals and assists, he still changed his game quite drastically. And from the words of Jurgen Klopp, this is what he said, that the young Mo was a super fast player who could run in behind. From the first day here, he had to do different things, and he adapted really well. But with the playmaker being probably more Roberto Firmino, you don't need those 2 players out wide to create opportunities. Now it is slightly different, especially with Darwin playing. We need another player up there who can create opportunities. He is smart enough to adapt to all these things, and there has been massive development since he has arrived. In all phases, he is world class, and that is probably the best thing you can say about a player. When it comes to players of all time, we like to put them into certain categories. Some are like the sexy categories, like pure dribblers, where they're just there to get you on your feet. And this is where Eden Hazard would come into play. And even Thierry Henry, for example, who is a prolific finisher. And people don't seem to really, because Salah is kind of like a bit of everything. He's not really pigeonholed into he is a prolific goal scorer or an amazing dribbler or an amazing playmaker. He's a bit of everything, and because of that, he's not really the top of any one list. When you think of prolific goal scorer, you think of maybe Harry Kane or Thierry Henry or maybe a Wayne Rooney. When you think of a playmaker, you may think of the likes of a Kevin De Bruyne. You may think of a David Silva. When you think of a dribbler, you may think of an Eden Hazard. But when it comes to Mo Salah, because he's a bit of everything, he's not really at the top of any one list, and I think that plays in his detriment. That is possibly the best way that I could word why Salah isn't really said in these conversations. I know that there may be some Liverpool fans that may say, oh wait, but look, it's just because he's a Liverpool player and people just don't like Liverpool, and maybe that could be the case, maybe for some fans if they're idiots, but any actual normal human being can look past the fact that he's a Liverpool player and just see him for being a great footballer. And if they can't see that, then they're not really worth talking to. Mo Salah is a global icon. He is a superstar in this era. I mean, if you really want to go into stats and that you may find really dumb, top 10 for the most followed footballer of all time. The only one main negative that you can really say about Mo Salah is the fact that when it comes to international games, when it comes to Egypt in the major tournaments, so the World Cup, it isn't particularly great, and maybe that could play a factor to it as well. Even in the Africa Cup of Nations, he's had his moments, absolutely, but you would maybe hope that he could maybe get them to another level with Egypt, and that sadly hasn't really been the case. Mo Salah is the definition of a modern professional. He's a consistent performer. He's a club legend for Liverpool, and he's a great personality as well, and as someone that many young kids can look up to as well. Even though he's 32 and that he may be less athletic in time, I can't see why he can't just play more in a deeper role, and that he could be more of a number 10 behind a striker because of his great passing ability and intelligence. I think he'll look after himself enough that he could still have at least 1 or 2 more years at the Premier League top level. But maybe you may disagree. I mean, athletically he will dwindle like every footballer does, but I just think his intelligence will make up for a lot of it, and he will look after himself. So, is Mo Salah disrespected? Or maybe this is all but a nonsense. He's still respected, but I feel like he should be higher up, and I just don't think he is. And that annoys me. So comment down below your thoughts, and I'll see you next time. See ya.